Alright, this is the 5th time that I'm recording this video, and in all times, I forgot my microphone on mute. Yes, welcome. So this is Vegas Effects. It is the Vegas post component that deals with motion graphics, and the potential competitor to After Effects. Very, very, very powerful stuff. I'm going to go ahead and hit a new composite shot, which is the motion graphics software's version of a timeline. And I'm going to call this main composite. And you know what? I'll keep it at 30 seconds. 30 seconds is nice. Reminds me of the old Instagram days. Now, very quickly, something that you should note in Vegas Effects, you can create folders to keep yourself organized. So in this case, say if I have more than one composite, I can make a folder called composite. And I'm going to also create another folder called footage. Let's say if I'm going to bring in footage, which I'll actually do in a couple of seconds. As you can see, if you have the footage folder selected and you hit the import button, you select your footage, it comes directly into the folder. Pretty neat. So just something really quick that I want to look at is the fact of how footage interacts with in Vegas Effects. Is that when I go ahead and throw these into the composite shot like so, you'll notice that instead of left to right, it's actually vertical. They're going top to bottom rather than left to right. So if I wanted to say, start with a keyboard scene, and at the 3rd second you want this to cut, well, there are two methods. One is to either drag it from the very end, which is not possible since the composite shot is 30 seconds and this video is more than 30 seconds. You could drag the video like this, though. Sorry about that. You could, with this one, so you could drag it like that, but this is a bit cumbersome. An easier way would be just press C, and your pointer becomes this cutting tool. You go ahead and cut where you want, and it splits into another layer which you no longer need. And you can just drag this. Now, you could leave it like that and, let the playhead go over to the next footage. But if you want to reduce the processing power and processing needed, you can just cut the part where you don't need, or just drag from the beginning like so. Let's say I just wanted to take the very end of the clip. And now if I go ahead and scrub through, no problem. If I press play, no problem at all. Okay, so that's how footage or scenes interact. Now, you might have noticed that the lighting has changed. That's because it's currently midnight and we're carrying on. If I go ahead and head over to the new layer and hit plane, I'm going to essentially get a solid color. And you know what? I'm going to settle on this little color right here that came up. So I'm going to click OK. And there are a lot of applications to planes. Now, you could use it to, if I go ahead and lower the opacity to 10%, you can see that I cast a little tint here on the scene. It has its coloring applications, like you could even add it to blend, use a blend mode, multiply, and then lower the opacity. Something that you could also do in Vegas Pro. So this is not something it's not entirely inventive, but it's there. The other option is, let me just switch this blend mode back a little bit. You can actually make shapes by using masks. And of course, for those of you who don't know, a mask is essentially a method of concealing information. So this circular mask seems to have made a circle out of the plane, but it's actually concealing the rest of the plane and only showing a circular look of the plane. And just to illustrate my point, if I go ahead and invert this mask, if I go ahead and click this right here, now we have a hole in the wall. How about that? And of course, plane layers, just like all layers really, can be a basis for an effect. So if I go ahead and throw in an atomic simulator, excuse me, and of course we'll have a completely different tutorial dedicated to this, you can go ahead and you can see that it's essentially been affected, and you know, I can now make this fractal mess out of it. And yeah, a plane can be a basis for an effect. So really, it's a pretty versatile tool. And my god, this does look interesting, doesn't it? Okay, last but not least, and let me remove the effect here for a second. Get out of here. And I can toggle the mask off, or I can just remove it. Let me just go ahead and remove it. If I wanted to make a lower third, well, a plane is exactly what the doctor ordered. And I can, well, since I want a rectangular shape, I can just go ahead and scale this, or mask, whichever you prefer. Just don't confuse the two. And let's say I want to add another plane to it. Maybe, well, this one. And, you know, I can just put this here. Oops. If I hold control and just drag, it'll just drag this side. If I drag like this, that side. So that's why I press control. Control just drags one side. And yeah, I think that looks sophisticated enough. So I'm gonna grab these two planes right now and combine them by putting them in their own composite. So I'm gonna call this a composite called lower third, and now it's its own composite. If I go back, think of it like a nested timeline, but it's a composite. So maybe I'll just use one of the preset animations. If I go ahead and throw in linear wipe, and I just play it, what a bland lower third, but hey, it fulfills the purpose. And I'm gonna say Muhammad Anis, soda baker, I guess. Can you bake soda? Never mind. So then I'm gonna key. You don't have to learn any of this, guys. Like, this is something that we'll dedicate another tutorial, but I'm just doing this real fast to illustrate my point, just to show the adaptability and the usefulness of plane. All right, so now do you know what a plane is? Next thing on the list, a grade layer. Now, a grade layer is pretty simple. Let me go ahead and just hide this little lower third. I'm going to hide the text. Now, a grade layer is quite simply the equivalent of an adjustment layer in other softwares. In other words, if I go ahead and grab, I'm just interested in your grade layer. If I go ahead and throw in a coloring effect, let's say, I don't know, let's go for the brightness and contrast. And let's say I increase the brightness. It's going to increase the brightness of each and every single layer beneath it. So just to illustrate my point, if I go ahead and bring back the lower third, it's actually brighter. If I make the computer scene disappear, okay, well, there's nothing beneath the computer scene, but let's say that there is. Let's bring this back over here. You can see that this is brighter, and the effect is not placed on the footage itself, but on the grade. In other words, a grade simply affects all the layers beneath it. You can also do the same with behaviors. So let's say there's a shake effect. I want every single layer to shake. And now it's shaking. Not only is it bright, but it's shaking. It is jittering. Even the lower third and the text is jittering. So this is kind of cool. And now, the last, but not the least, is actually, well, the light in point is something that I'm going to cover in a later advanced video. For now, let's just go ahead for the camera. Now, a camera really doesn't do much when there's no 3D layers, so what are we going to do? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to turn one of these layers into 3D, or maybe even a couple of them. So I'm going to pick the lower third. I'm going to turn that into a 3D plane. And what does that do, will you ask? Well, first of all, it has transported it to 3D space. I'm going to hide the text for a second there because I don't need it. If I go ahead and rotate the camera, not this thing, even though the properties of the lower third have changed. If I go ahead and rotate the camera like this, well, now you can see it's kind of like it's being shifted like that, right? That's because the camera's kind of like moving like that. So I bring it back. If I zoom in, I'm zooming in with the camera. Notice it's only affecting just the lower third. If I go ahead and take the computer scene, now the computer scene is affected too. So now if I zoom back and I flip the orientation a little bit and mess around, you can see the infinite amount of possibilities with a camera layer. I'm just gonna play this for kicks. Let's see how it looks like. Okay, this is some quirky stuff. This is some quirky stuff right there. Alright, alright. So this is a lot of fun, isn't it? Okay. One last thing. Well, I guess I could talk about... Oh yeah, I'm gonna flip from the active camera to perspective. And perspective, well, puts things into perspective. You can actually you know, just maneuver around in 3D space. This does not affect the layers, and you know, you can turn and you can essentially get a better perspective on how to control the camera. The camera should be, where's the camera? Should show up in a second. What up, bro? Where you at? Oh, here it is. You see? This is the camera. The camera right here. If I go ahead and move this, you can see the camera back off. If I go ahead and do this, you can see the camera go forward. So this is a beginner's tour to Vegas Effect. This is not a proper tutorial. This is just a quick breeze through, just so you can see what are the basics that you can expect out of Vegas Effects. There are proper tutorials. Stay tuned.